Very warm welcome to today's Eros and Thanatos Circle. I'm here with Sven and Chris today. Sven's my husband of 22 years, and you'll hear more about him in a little bit. And today's topic is, if you love somebody, set them free. Yeah, I'm just gonna dive right into how this started, this what we call ENT circle now. And as I'm only starting to speak, I'm already getting touched here. I have a moving weekend behind me, and it's touching for me to be here with Sven, with my husband, and to have Chris here, with whom I'm doing this project, but who's, of course, we are all part of a circle of people, of 6 people who have met last year. So the beginning of this was that I met Chris and another gentleman a year ago at a workshop, a spiritual workshop around transparent communication, the work of Thomas Hübel. And we got to get to know each other and spend great time there, and often, yeah, you get to know people well, hearts open up during these kinds of intense workshops. But then at the end of the workshop, Chris, this other gentleman, and I basically just hugged goodbye, finishing off this wonderful workshop, and went home. I drove back to Hamburg, and Chris went with this other man to Berlin, where he stayed for another night before going back to the US. And so it turns out, as I'm arriving at home, Sven, my husband, still being at work, I'm greeting my kids, I'm just about to unpack my bags. I'm receiving a WhatsApp from Chris and the other man, and with just this sweet invitation of, hey, we miss you. Don't you want to come to Berlin too? And it just was the most natural thing, even though it might sound strange. And my instant impulse was like, yeah, I totally want to go. I totally want to go to Berlin. And this is one of the moments where you think, okay, this is what's true to me. I really want to go. And so what I did is I just picked up the phone and called Sven and told him, this might be strange because I'm just home, but now I'm going to go back and meet Chris and this other man and spend some time there. And that's what I did. And this was a time that we spent. It was great seeing each other again, and there was some intimacy involved. And to me, this definitely has to do with the topic of today's talk around generosity and setting somebody free and what that can look like. There are many, many aspects to that. And maybe we can dive into that today. And the way this went on is I got back from Berlin, and then pretty soon we formed this circle of like where Chris wanted to contact Sven, and then we got on Zoom together, just like now in this combination. And then the other man, like all the partners were brought in. And so we ended up with this group of 6 people, 3 couples, and having an incredibly transformative time. And we were so impacted by this and the transformation that happened from this, that we want to share from that. And yeah, if anybody of you two wants to add anything else?
Yeah, I do. And so when you said that you repacked your bags and you called me, you disclosed that you were going there, not with the intent, but the possibility of getting intimate with Chris and the other man. And yeah, I think that's a segue into today's topic on how that went. But the power of disclosure was on full display there. And later I learned also that as soon as Heike had committed to Chris and the other man, that they pulled up a picture of me on the internet to look at me and invite me in energetically. And I'm usually not one to be phased energetically easily, but that was very, very touching and really appreciated, and felt all the way from Berlin to Hamburg. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I can say, you know, being there with this gentleman and inviting Heike, the element of inclusion and full disclosure, as you say, Sven, was really there. And then I have a sense this is going to be a big part of our conversation, is as simple as those things sound. And of course, one could say, oh, that's being honest or open. But these those entry points when we really live into them, it seems another aspect of ourselves comes online, which very startling to me. Beautiful.
Yeah. And one thing that's interesting right now, as we are sitting here, Sven and I we're just returning from a weekend. We wanted to look at a project in Berlin, and now the two of us ended up visiting this other man from our circle and spent some time there. And so we just returned from that, and like something about that is just touching, to be here now in this constellation. And yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then some of you might wonder about the name Eros and Thanatos, so perhaps that's, unless you have a plan to mention that at some other point, I want to briefly mention this. So when the WhatsApp group was started, and it was very clear quickly, I think, thanks to the three of you, Chris, Heike, and the other gentleman.
They're not disclosing his names yet.
Yeah.
That you wanted everybody in. You wanted a conversation, an open and fully disclosed conversation with all of us. So initially there was the idea to call this the Eros Circle, since that sort of the fire fueling the preceding event, and also the fire for us coming together. And because I wouldn't call them reservation, but definitely at the same time as I felt drawn to this, there's also a sort of inner withholding, an inner uncertainty of where this would lead for me, where this would lead for Heike and me in our relationship. And so I wanted to have the destructive force of the universe, so the force that prepares the ground for Phoenix arising again, if you will, to be included in that name. And so that is Thanatos. And of course, that also goes back to Freudian psychology, Eros and Thanatos. He mentioned those. So that to see that those are two poles that are in a sort of a loving dance relationship, and there's really not the one without the other.
Yeah, and as you speak to this, Sven, I remember one conversation we had where we both were feeling like excitement, but also sadness and probably fear in the background, where it felt like we are leaving our known ground here. We are opening up to something that's different and that we really don't know where it will lead us. And and it was nice to acknowledge that, like this opening, that this is scary, and it's and like from what had happened so far, this for us, and this is really not about having a polyamorous life where we whatever go out with everybody. This is totally not what this is about. This is much more about really being true to ourselves, to what's happening, and to being super honest with that. And what came from it was like all kinds of transformation and a lot of things. And this is another aspect of generosity. A lot of things became aware between our relationship, Sven and I, by having the eyes of the other 4 people on us and witnessing our relationship. This is like the whole generosity of like respecting the other's universes. I don't know if you want to go there right now, Sven, or do you?
Yeah, well, since we're there, might as well go there. Yeah.
Good point.
So there's a perhaps best explained or related to in a little story that just recently happened between Heike and myself, where when we purchased the house that we currently live in here in the east of Hamburg, Heike had a how do you call these feng shui expert come and do her thing, and as you can tell, it's not quite my thing. Do her thing and give us hints on how to energetically stabilize the house. And one of the pointers that she gave to us was to place a big rock in the, I guess that's the east or somewhat easter. So that's very, very specific here. The very specific place in the backyard to our house. And it took me a while to get that rock. I finally managed, and the first rock that I got was way too big. It's about 3 metric tons. So it came on a crane, and the crane couldn't put it into the right position. So I ended up a few days ago, really, just so a few years after we bought the house, to get a smaller rock, about 500 kilograms. And it came with on the truck with a crane, and the crane put it in the right position. I wanted to surprise Heike, so she had found the rock, and I just got it and bought it and organized a crane truck, and they got it here and they put it in place. And I thought, well, that's great. It's just the right location for this rock, just where Heike had told me that she would want the rock. And then Heike came home, or I sent her a picture, and her immediate reaction, sweet, but it's in the wrong place.
No, I said, great, and it's almost in the right space.
Oh, it's almost in the right space. So, and we did go, and so that there was disappointment on my side that I had tried to, from like make a surprise and make her happy and put the rock in the right position, and I failed by what, like probably no more than 2 inches, if at all. We have to find out. The lady who did the channeling for us is currently in China with her master. So once she comes back, we'll find out if it's in the right spot or not. But anyway, there was this disappointment here on my side. And then Heike being disappointed, saying like, and I think Heike, the way you explained it was, well, you get it just right, but couldn't you have just asked me? And I said, well, it actually didn't occur to me to ask you. In my universe, come back to the universe term, in my universe, I did perfectly. I got the truck, I put the rock to exactly where I felt that the rock needed to be. And so it was really hard for me to relate that Heike wanted to have the rock like 2 inches or 3 inches in, I don't know, more east or more south. But we quickly got over the initial reactivity beyond it and found, well, it's kind of a pattern that because we've been together for 20 years, because I'm in love with Heike and she's in love with me, that doesn't mean that we can automatically assume that she will understand me. And also perhaps, sorry, I'm holding a monologue here.
Okay.
Go ahead then.
No, and you might wonder what this has to do with generosity, but it's really what we have found out, and this is really within this help of these other people in our circle, is that it's become more clear, because sometimes in this couple bubble, you don't get this. You get stuck in certain places, but you can't unravel it. And what we have been learning very recently is that, like, to just get it, that our universe is the way how we are made up and how we think and perceive is different. It's just different. And somehow, because we are together, there is so often this assumption, because I love you, you have to understand me, or if you don't understand me, that means you don't love me. And yeah, and it gets so tight in these places, and we get so upset about it. And it seems at the same time, it feels so ridiculous. Like, here it's this rock story that repeated now. We have this one big boulder in the back that's unmovable ever since. And now we have a smaller rock that's almost in the right place. And the first time, this was a bigger issue. And this time, and this is what I mean with generosity, this time I was not so much triggered. I was able to listen to Sven. And the way he said, like, I got it that he wanted to make a surprise, which is super sweet. And then I heard the part of, it didn't occur to me to just ask you if you want to be present and we place that rock together, which I would have been excited about, and which would have been very normal in my universe. Like, in my universe, this would show up. I would, of course, ask the other person. But the way Sven said it, I could feel it's true for him in his world, even though it's different in mine, or it would show up differently. And in that moment, I feel a moment of opening up in a generous way. And like, okay, this is different, and I actually hear you. It's actually reaching me, and I don't take it as an attack. Like, not assuming to be attacked or having something be against me. And I'm not sure if this carries across, but for us, like, looking at this, gaining awareness about this has been going on a lot. And it's such a relief to open up to that the perception of the other person is different. And then once you move through that frustration of not being seen, heard, understood, then we realize it's much more about that than about the content of the discussion. And so many times as long-term couples, we discuss topics on the content level, and that's like what we found out for us, that's not what it is about often. So the generosity of, starting to see the other person for who they are and how their universe works. And I think this doesn't only apply for long-term couples.
And it also doesn't apply for rocks only.
No.
Yeah, I'd like to mention something here that, so, you know, the significant thing that drew all of us together and has held us together for a year, the six of us, is varying degrees of coupling and attraction energies, and us three couples not being isolated as couples and being very open to express some of our interests or curiosities about another person outside of our primary relationship. And so the piece about the generosity, and whether it's rocks or whether it's sexual human beings, it's quite a spread on the creation spectrum there. But is that, and this is where the awakening piece really shows up for me, is that in aspects of existence, whether it's a decision about where to put a rock, or if we're really honest with ourselves and open with our significant other, sometimes we have feelings for other people. And so it's almost like there's two choices. You could either go into your patterns that you know really well, arguing about rocks and where it's going to go, and they don't get me, or I'm not heard, or whether it's being attracted to someone else, I'm going to withhold this because I'm afraid, or because I feel shame. But then opening it all up, there is this enormous sense of recognizing how much we have not been awake, like really living in kind of a dream. The term Adyashanti uses a lot, but it's being convincingly real. And then in this space where it does involve people that are all oriented around a body of work known as transparent communication, and being open with our sense of Eros toward one another at times, to really walk this and notice how much we're not getting others' worlds and how much they're not getting ours. And then with the six of us, all six eyes on this all the time, I mean, I can speak for myself. My perception has dramatically clarified in regard to how to express to my primary partner and to receive her. So in areas that completely were blind spots to me, that I was just kind of walking along and being a certain kind of partner rather than being a real participant in the relationship. So really, really giant.
And perhaps this also segues nicely into tonight's topic of setting your partner free. If you love somebody, set them free. I immediately get the Sting tune in my head when I say this. Very nice tune. Only because I don't understand the other, because it doesn't occur in my universe, in my world, to do it that way, or to say it that way, to think that way, to feel that way, is in no means an attack on me. And so therefore, there is, for me, usually with a few breaths and becoming inwardly quiet, there's more the start of a curiosity from that. And I think what's really key, and has always been key to the six of us here, is our commitment to full disclosure. Obviously, it's easy to fully disclose, and it's easy to set somebody free if it's about nothing or not about much. But when it comes to sharing intimacy among the six of us, perhaps, that might be a different story. And because Eros is such a powerful force, it automatically, sensibilities will show up, and vulnerabilities and old wounds and old shadows will just show up in this very strong light. And so to have everybody on board and always fully disclose is a real, for how I experienced this past year, such an important trust builder. Because for me, this takes, there's a curve where this is immensely healing to participate in, to just have that trust built. If I know Heike, however uncomfortable that will be for her, or however uncomfortable that might be for me, we'll still fully disclose the truth. There's a buildup of a trust that she will continue to do so. And that is not trust that is based in a system of rules and how we do it, but it's really a trust that comes from an inward knowing rather than sort of mental rules about it. And so I think that's a lot about what, to use that expression, floated our boat here.
Mm-hmm. I can recall a share that you brought once early in our days of all of us connecting and being together, is, Sven, that when Heike came to see myself and this other gentleman, and then you shared later that you were with your experience so much of your heart beating faster, you know, I may be recalling this somewhat vaguely, but as far as the actual nature of the experience is fear, tension, not knowing, but the thing that got my attention, which is something we're all doing, is that you were with that. That was like, I want to be with this. I want to be with my heart beating. I want to be with this experience. Mm-hmm. And that's powerful, because this is where I see, and I it's my interest and my hobby and my living, the science of transformation, the movement through our egoic structure into more transpersonal spaces. And it is this willingness, the self-generosity and the generosity to others, to keep on having our experiences fully. Mm-hmm. And then how that sort of just opens up to a whole other experience of self and other that otherwise remains completely hidden. Yeah. And this is a, not to like say, oh, this is wonderful or something. It's built into all of us, but this really is a sort of awakening out of real convincing, compelling patterns. Mm-hmm. And then when the six of us started doing this together, and at first I noticed it was kind of like, oh, be a good participant in the group, make yourself share, what have you. But then it just got to the point where this became automatic, where all of us witnessing each other would just be so supportive of like, what else is there? Anything else? And very, very freeing.
Mm-hmm. And such a...
And the truth is, I believe we all don't know necessarily what it will bring up with us within us when, this is my and Sven's experience. Like when one of us is attracted to another person, to whatever degree intimacy might go or not, that like there are people that Sven is attracted to and there's no intimacy, and it totally brings up topics in me. It's rough, it's Thanatos right there. And then there are other situations where it's different. And so it's really hard to like know ahead of time. It really takes this willingness to jump into the unknown, and the commitment to show up with whatever happens. And then what I noticed, like there was one experience when Sven was intimate with one of the other women, and he came back, and I didn't know how this would be for me. And there were all different movements happening in me, just moving through me. And then eventually we were being intimate, we were sleeping together, and there was this point where I could choose contraction or I could open up more. And that point is a point where it is a conscious choice to a degree, if it's available in me. So there was this moment where I could feel, like you feel it in the system of the other person. There is a mixing of energies that does happen. And there's also like, it's probably not for everybody. And it's like to whatever degree one wants that or not. But in that moment, I could feel the energy of the other woman with Sven. And I like this other person. I like her, I appreciate her. She's a beautiful woman. And then there is this fear base, this like, but this is my man, like this securing, this controlling movement. And then there is this other movement, which then happened in me of like, wow, what if I open up to her too? And I didn't know this, it just happened that way. And then all of a sudden I get a hit of her gorgeous energy too, while I'm intimate with Sven. And all of a sudden it's a total turn on, and it's an enrichment. It's like by my generosity of actually inviting in and opening up, there is an enrichment happening and a deepened connection between the two of us too in that moment. And so I'm very interested in these points where I can consciously choose generosity, opening up, compared to contraction and fear. And it's just a distinctly different taste in my system. And it's not always available, but more and more often. And it becomes more available with this online trust of being kept updated of the truth of what's happening. And it feels very alive. So, yeah.
And there's freedom here, in a way, you know, as all the spiritual paths and consciousness work speak to liberation and freedom. But as I hear you speak, Heike, there is that if it's available, that if we're not so contracted, but here's the point, when we're so contracted, there's no choice. Yeah. That's like the only thing we're compelled to think, act, and feel that way. Yeah. And then there's something else going on, and this is the awakening aspect. There's choice. So there's truth, trust, a definite spiritual dynamic here. And then the generosity shows up as truly as an indicator of a more awake state. And boy, when you make that choice, it's different, and it's for me, it's life-giving, and it's also it's nourishing, and my sense of self and beingness clarifies. And as you were saying, as far as being connected to Nadine, you know, as all of us have gotten to know each other, there's a profound friendliness that's showing up here, apart from any sort of erotic thing. And I can remember, you know, when I came and saw you guys, we had been running this group for about 5 months. And then I came to Hamburg and walked in the door of your guys' house. And when when I first saw you in the flesh, Sven, in real same shared space, you know, and both of us have commented on this, it was like, oh, it's you. Like, I've always known you. And much more so than familiarity. There was this sense of really have gotten each other's world, even with the otherwise challenging dynamic that I'm somewhat attracted to the woman that you're married to. And she's attracted to me, and we're open about that. But again, this is the generosity. This isn't like polyamory. Oh, this is all fun. This is like, whoa, like everything's welcome.
Yeah, yeah. And there's another kind of generosity in that too. And you, Sven, you mentioned that earlier. And that is to make a choice with these attractions to also at points not go to certain places. So if I know that something, because it's important with this honesty to also know about the impact we are causing. And then a great generosity might show up by saying, okay, I can tell this is too much right now for any one of the 6 of us in the circle. So generosity could show up in, okay, let's not do this right now. But then it's a complete different taste. It's not coming from being controlled. It's not because I'm not allowed to, or somebody tells me what to do or not from some moral or ethics. It's really it's also a free, generous choice to then say, okay, this doesn't need to happen right now. It is more important to look at the health or the well-being of the entire system. And there is no rush, nothing has to happen. And that also feels like very much coming from, not from ego to me, but from a broader, more expanded place. And it is what you were speaking to, Chris, with this friendliness that's coming up, this just caring. There is like a friendship, a love that's bigger than the content of it, whether it's like, okay, there is intimacy or not. There's something that, carries through in a bigger way.
Almost feels like a state of being starts to show up in all of us, rather than what can I get from you, or rather than, you know, how can we give each other something to feel better about ourselves. It's just a field, like an ecology, and startling. And even I've had breakthroughs with my partner here that I said this so many times, but it's so true, that I know wouldn't have been available. Even last night, we here in Boulder, we were in a really big party, and parties can be really fun. And also there's other people around that you're attracted to, different situations. And I was just so touched by saying that, I mean, we are growing together. We've known each other 2 years now, but like, I'm feeling a lot less fear and much more freedom. And this, like you were saying, Sven, like this willingness to be uncomfortable, and also you, Heike, like that choice point, and going into that, not out of like pushing myself, but then once I make that choice, it's like, you know, I'm really not afraid. I really am free. And it's not like a carelessness. It's like, I can be with this attraction to this woman and the fear and be free. This is really powerful. And then your attractions to each other really start to shine, because you realize you're not there out of obligation or out of habit. So really something.
I want to add here that for me, this really comes back to trust, and to what both of you said, Heike, when you said that, so when the setting free, or set them free, and of course there's, for me, that there's the intellectual understanding that is the right thing to do. I love you, I want to set you free. And what really brings ground to this is if I know, you know, if I know from experience and from an inward knowing that if I'm having a difficult time with that, if it's painful for me to work with that, I can say it and it will be heard. Like when you said, so I also have the freedom to not act upon something because I see what impact that might have. That is so relaxing to the whole system, to know that I can just share how I feel about this. And like you said, Chris, then there's there's also an immediate sort of breakthrough. It's like, oh, I'm actually not afraid. And because it's much less the fear of what might happen as the fear of, we have these funny names like FOBLO and FOMLO, fear of being left out, a fear of suddenly not being part of it anymore. Suddenly there's, instead of a person, there will be a wall. And if I know from experience that this will not happen, it makes everything easier, and fear simply just subsides. If it does. If it doesn't, I can still express it.
Yes.
Yeah, and that, it turns out that very often those fears that come up, they are of course very young places. It's like what shows up is a lot of times young, old fears. And so in that, this space to me becomes a super generous healing place where you just can't help but receive healing by showing up for this with each other. Yeah, and what shows up for me is just with all that, like with this generosity, which by the way totally bonds me. Like when I taste this freedom, like it's like, wow, what a sweeter gift could I give to somebody than really wanting to live, letting them be who they are. That's actually, I find that highly attractive. In whatever way that then shows up and is lived. Yeah. And now I lost my red thread.
Well, there, you know, it's it's here. Oh, it's always here. That's what I've been really noticing with the six of us. And here's like another real significant clarifying point is that, so sure, we're all opening to being honest. There's trust. We're being very clear about what our experiences are. It may sound, oh, this is free, you get to do whatever you want. But here's, as Heike was just speaking to, as far as the impact, there's something really powerful that shows up. And it's automatic, it's built in, that rather than this being self-indulgent freedom, which would be sort of like the feasting of the ego self, there is this sense of responsibility, very significant responsibility, not in terms of like ethics or morals, but you start to sense deeply the impact you're going to have on another person. And you're also committed to following your own energies. So these multiplicities that start to show up are, I'll just say it, these, you know, they can be named as like higher order functions, but there's another perspective on these capacities, is that they're built in and that we're just so unconsciously committed to reduced functioning or down regulation. And when we kind of push all that stuff away, our potential and our capacities are just right there. And boy, is it startling and powerful. So this is what, yeah, it's a little challenging to talk about, but boy, the experiences are like, you know, they say in the traditions, one taste, the first language. Mm-hmm. These ways of showing up, when we arrive there, it's like, wow. Or it's like Rumi, the Rumi poem, you know, beyond the field, beyond the places of right and wrong, there is a field. I will meet you there. This is part of the traditions and part of our capacity. So yeah, it's been, and it still keeps happening right now. I mean, the six of us are in a lot of discussion right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have a regular job, a regular day job, and coming home and having, I don't know, hundreds of WhatsApps. Chris, you can attest to that. It's like a 2 to 3 hour job daily sometimes. Not every day.
Wonderful too.
Yes, yeah. Very wonderful. I do want to read all this.
Yes. Yeah, my partner and I, we drove from 3 hours across the state of Colorado 2 days ago, and literally almost the whole time we were just listening to all the recordings and reading all the material, and there's a caring, you know, it's not just that, oh, what's she doing, what's he's doing. There's this caring and noticing how much we all keep learning from each other. Very powerful.
A lot of richness. It's like you move into the fear and the joy, and then what happens is a field opens up with richness that I didn't even know that was there before.
Yeah.
And it's not against anybody.
Right, right. Multiplicities of an unlimited nature, and this is why we're here. This is why we're sharing this. We've noticed such that, you know, all of us are dedicated practitioners and very interested in personal growth and spiritual development, and the experiences we've had here are like the real deal. It's, you know, we're actually experiencing these things through the Eros and through the Thanatos, and we all care about this. We're interested in looking into communities. You know, all of us are, about how to live the second half of our lives in a more conscious, connected way, and here in this format to invite conversation. We'll be, you know, ending this recording part here because we're saving these recordings, but to open a conversation. And build a community. And this is our intent, to be able to share these experiences more openly because they are built in.
Yeah. And this is where we're gonna move into the Q&A part. And for the people who are listening to this recording, who don't get the opportunity to ask questions live on the call, you're always welcome to send us an email with your questions, and you will find it below this recording.
And then next week's topic?
Oh, next week's topic, right. Thank you, Chris. Next week's topic will be, how come we often treat our intimate partners different or worse than our housemates? Hopefully you never made this experience, but if you did, this might be for you.
I've never done that. Only other people do that.
Yes. Okay, so let's switch to the Q&A now.